Hello there, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're going to be exploring the classification types of every ship, from the tiny starfighters to the gargantuan dreadnoughts and everything in between. Sit back and strap in, and thanks for watching. Starfighters. A starfighter is the smallest ship on our list. Often referred to as a fighter, it is a small and manoeuvrable spacecraft designed for combat in the atmosphere or space. Certain models of bombers, gunships, transports and trainers can be covered by this broad category. The primary weapon for most starfighters were laser cannon, but these could be supplemented with additional weaponry such as proton torpedo launchers to provide additional firepower. Often, these were effective against other starfighters and similar targets, but didn't have the firepower to punch through the defence of a capital ship. Some starfighters, however, like the B-Wing starfighter, carried sufficient armaments that they could destroy capital ships on their own. Starfighters could also cause tremendous devastation when working in groups. For instance, a squadron of bombers could easily disable or even destroy a capital ship with the right weaponry. Many starfighters were equipped with deflector shields to protect them from enemy fire, radiation and micrometeor impacts. Typically, they carried a single deflector shield generator, which could be adjusted to protect specific parts of the starfighter. Some starfighters were even equipped with a hyperdrive, whether integral to the craft itself or by means of external attachment such as a hyperspace transport ring. Shuttles. Next up we have shuttles, which were a type of starship used to transport personnel and small amounts of cargo through space, often from one starship to another or from ship to planetary body. Most shuttles had little to no weaponry, as they would generally avoid combat situations. They would be lightly protected, but similar to fighters, could be equipped with deflector shields to protect them from enemy fire and micrometeor impacts through the employment of a single deflector shield generator. Long-range transports would typically be equipped with a hyperdrive, usually integral to the craft itself. Perhaps the most well-known shuttle was the imperial-class shuttle, also known simply as the Imperial Shuttle, and was occasionally used by dignitaries and high-ranking officers, but also more frequently used to ferry stormtroopers and cargo to where they were required. Freighters. A freighter, also known as a cargo ship, was a kind of spacecraft used for hauling cargo from one place to another. Although light freighters could usually hold their own in combat against other fighter craft, larger vessels such as bulk freighters tended to be less capable. These large freighters could be easy targets considering their large size, slow speed and weak armament. For this reason, most heavy freighters required escorts when navigating more dangerous regions of the galaxy, or were upgraded by their users to increase survivability. The most famous freighters were the Millennium Falcon and the Ghost. Corvettes. Corvettes were a type of small starship used during the final days of the Galactic Republic and the reign of the Galactic Empire. They typically measured around 100 to 200 meters in length and were considered the smallest of the capital ships. They were typically small, fast, maneuverable and relatively light armed. Generally large enough to be considered a capital ship, but smaller than a frigate, corvettes filled a variety of roles that ranged from picket duty within large fleets to system defence and convoy escort. Corvettes were relatively inexpensive and were in ranges of rebel, pirate, smuggler and mercenary fleets and armadas. They were suitable for dealing with any ships smaller than themselves, and though they were not effective against larger ships without support, many were famous for outrunning and escaping them, thanks to their exceptional speed and manoeuvrability for a capital ship. The most famous corvette is of course the CR-90 Corvette, more specifically the Tantive IV, the consular ship of Princess Leia, captained by Captain D'Artilles. After escaping the Battle of Scarif, its damaged hyperspace drive allowed them to be tracked and boarded by Vader's ship at the start of A New Hope. Frigates. Frigates were a military class of starship measuring around 200 to 400 meters in length, which would typically be used in a number of supporting roles to protect larger ships within the fleet. They were often used to defend unarmed freighters and transports. Many frigates lacked manoeuvrability, but would often be heavily armed to compensate, and could even be outfitted with a complement of starfighters to support and protect. Notable mentions in this class is the EF-76 Nebulon B, which was originally built by the Empire as fleet defence. However, it was more famously employed within the Rebel fleet, primarily as a medical frigate. At the end of The Empire Strikes Back, we see Luke being treated and recovering on board one of these ships. Cruisers. Ships of 400 to 600 meters in length were known as cruisers, and fulfilled a variety of roles within the fleet. Due to these varying uses, their sizes varied and could be divided into two categories based upon length, function and armament. These categories were light and medium cruisers. Light cruisers would be on the smaller end, typically being at around 400 metres. Medium cruisers could be between 400 and 600 metres. Light and medium cruisers were generally used in protective roles, employed to act as perimeter defence for the larger flagships, by utilising their heavy armour and firepower against both smaller and larger enemy ships. They were typically a halfway point between the smaller capital ships and the larger capital ships, and therefore employed a good balance of capabilities and functions of each. Heavy cruisers. Heavy cruisers are in a category on their own, as they are a step up once again from the light and medium cruisers. Heavy cruisers would typically measure between 600 to 1000 metres long. In the Old Republic and High Republic era, heavy cruisers were generally some of the largest ships in the galaxy. With the outbreak of the Clone Wars and the rise of the Galactic Empire, larger and more powerful ships were created. Heavy cruisers fulfilled a similar function to light and medium cruisers, but at a significantly larger scale. They would utilise their superior armour and weapons to decimate smaller ships and fleets, and could even fulfil roles such as planetary bombardment, invasions and ship-to-ship combat. The most notable example of a heavy cruiser was the Republic's 750 metre long Acclamator assault ship, which is the predecessor of the Imperial Star Destroyer. It would be used to break through planetary blockades, land troops onto the battlefield, and provide fire support against enemy ships. They would often land directly onto the planet's surface and load and unload thousands of troopers at a moment's notice. Star Destroyer. Next, we move on to the most famous category, and that's Star Destroyers. These were the ships that were between 1 and 2 kilometers in length. The term Star Destroyer originates from the idea they were capable of controlling and destroying entire star systems, with their incredible firepower and fighter support. Most famous mentions are the Republic's 1,000 metre long Venator-class Star Destroyer and the 1.6 kilometre long imperial-class Star Destroyer, of which Vader's flagship, the Devastator, was the most well known. The Star Destroyers became relatively common flagships within their different Republic and Imperial fleets. They would operate alone or alongside other ships, create fleet task groups, particularly when invading systems or destroying enemy fleets. Like the cruisers, they could carry out multiple roles but at a much larger scale, and were often the largest ship within a fleet and within space battles, protected by thick armour and layers of overlapping turbo laser and cannons on the surface. Battle cruisers. Battle cruisers were a go-between Star Destroyers and the next class up, Dreadnaughts. They were huge ships that were typically between 2 and 5 kilometers in length. The most famous example of a battle cruiser was Kylo Ren's flagship, the Finalizer, which was a 2.9 kilometer long resurgent-class Star Destroyer. Battle cruisers were designed to be amongst the most powerful within not only their fleet, but within the galaxy, and were near indestructible to anything less than a fleet of Star Destroyers with significant supporting elements. They were designed to operate at long range, independently, without the need for supporting ships, but would typically carry large complements of fighters to intercept enemy fighters and corvettes, whilst using its powerful turbo lasers to rain hell on larger classes of ships. Dreadnaughts. The largest class of starship was the Dreadnought, and encompasses all ships over 5 kilometers in length. Dreadnoughts were so big that they were essentially cities in space. The most well-known example of a Dreadnought was the Imperial's executor-class Dreadnought, which came in at a whopping 19 kilometers long. Vessels of this size and shape were often given the name of Super Star Destroyers. This class boasted unrivaled firepower and protection and would often require the combination of entire fleets to defeat. The single biggest ship that we know of in Star Wars, also by definition, falls into this class, which is the Supremacy, which was Snoke's personal dreadnought. This mega-class dreadnought came in at a ridiculous 60 kilometers wide, which is the length of 3 executors. If you enjoyed today's Star Wars video, we've got more on the screen for you right now. Also, make sure to drop us a like, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe and join the family. Until next time, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.